Hey everyone, it's Scott Hansen from NFL Red Zone reminding you to watch Sports Ballers, the podcast that gets you caught up on everything Washington sports and beyond.
Welcome to another episode of the Sports Ballers podcast. I'm Cory Puffett, joined as always by Eric Meyer and Evan Ash. This is episode 193, fresh off of a special live edition last week on camera for the NFL Draft. It was a fun time. Eric, Evan, how are you guys doing?
I have caught up on sleep now, so I'm sure our audience is relieved that our faces for radio are back where they belong, behind our logo.
Well, Cory, you must be even Steven here because you've got one friend who's caught up on sleep and you've got another who's exhausted, but that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, this was a short turnaround for us going on Thursday and then coming back on Tuesday for our next show, but this is what we like to do, so we're back at it, fresh off the NFL Draft, and why don't we go ahead and just dive right into that. Get the elephant in the room out of the way, and kind of recap some of what we saw both on Thursday. I mean, we talked for a little bit after the first round was over, so we probably won't have too much more to talk about on that front, but maybe a few thoughts that have developed since then, and then, of course, any takeaways from some of the ensuing rounds from Friday and Saturday. And Evan, let's start with your Ravens. On Thursday, you all traded away your, top wide receiver, Hollywood Brown, and your 100th pick in the draft to the Cardinals for their 23rd overall pick. And with it, you drafted Iowa center Tyler Linderbaum after taking Kyle Hamilton earlier in the first round. You have any additional thoughts on the Ravens' first round of the draft?
I don't know about additional thoughts, but I guess I feel the same way that I did Thursday night. I was tired of Hollywood, and the Ravens said they were going to pick up his fifth-year option. They didn't, but that doesn't mean that the Cardinals won't, I guess. So let's see. I really like the Kyle Hamilton pick, and obviously offensive line was a need, so getting the center, Linderbaum, was another good pick. They addressed two needs, really, because the defense was not only horribly injured last year, but it was bad, and the offensive line was also horribly injured and bad. So, they helped fix that. Let's see. I mean, they really robbed the Cardinals blind, right? Like, what are y'all doing? Hollywood Brown's not that good. What are you talking about? Well, we got a receiver who's short and can't run fast anymore and can't catch the ball, and a third-round pick for our first-rounder. I'm sorry, who made that deal, and why does he still have a job right now?
Well, speaking of the Cardinals, before we continue on with what happened on the 3 draft days, why don't we talk about DeAndre Hopkins, who it turned out after the fact he's going to be suspended for the first 6 games of the season, which, not to say that Hollywood Brown is in any way a replacement for DeAndre Hopkins, but at least they'll have another warm body out there for Kyler Murray to try to throw the ball to during the part of the season when Kyler Murray is actually going to be good.
Well, they have A.J. Green and I think Christian Kirk or somebody.
Oh, no, they got rid of Christian Kirk, didn't they?
And Christian Kirk signed an insane contract with the Jaguars they completely jacked up the wide receiver market.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, my other screen is just melting down right now.
Oh. Well, we can still hear you, so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I still have you on the one screen. I don't know what the deal is with that, but yeah. So I mean, they just completely robbed the Cardinals. It's kind of ridiculous, honestly. But I'm fine with it myself. right?
Yeah, I mean,
So,
you got two really good players in that first round, and then the second round at 45 overall, you guys got.
but then
Go ahead,
the
Evan.
even more crazy part about this trade, so the Ravens drafted Hollywood Brown in 2019 with the 25th overall pick. They got 3 years of play for him when he was at his cheapest, and then they traded him away for the 23rd pick.
Yeah.
Like what is happening? Who is anybody else watching this right now?
I mean, you did also send them the 100th pick, so it's not like it was just Hollywood Brown to move up 2 spots. But yes, I take your point.
It might as well have been. Like what? This is crazy. It's just that Hollywood Brown can't play. Okay, like I'm just saying the obvious part out loud for all 3 of our listeners here. Hollywood Brown can't play. His main attribute is his speed, but he's lost that since he came in the league with a Liz Frank injury. So apparently that never returned.
And he catches infrequently.
You can't catch the ball. He just disappears sometimes. So yeah. I mean, I'm sure Hollywood's a good dude and stuff. But, in terms of production on the field, he can go. So, I got a little irritated with some people saying, oh, well, the Ravens traded their only receiver and they have just nothing but crap left behind. That got me a little hot under the collar the past few days when, Rashad Bateman's just being completely slept on, right? Like people just, he's
not some schmuck out there.
Thin air.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm confident in him. And, the Ravens offense is mostly throwing to tight ends anyway. So they got a whole bunch of tight ends. There's like 17 tight ends now.
Yeah, including one of the
They drafted
best
2
in
more
the
tight
business
ends.
and Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews has burst onto the scene these last 2 years.
Absolutely. So, they're going to be able to run the ball. They got Daniel Falele, who's 6'8", 380 or something.
He is an enormous human being.
Yes. Paul Bunyan says he's an enormous human being. Right? Like, that guy is just gigantic. So he's going to be pushing people out of the way. Former rugby player. Also played a little fullback at Minnesota. So, the offensive line is going to be able to block for Lamar. Be able to run the ball. Got plenty of tight ends to throw to, mix in some receivers here and there. They tightened up the back end at safety. They drafted another edge player in David Ojabo.
Yeah, what do you think about that pick? That was the 45th overall pick in the second round.
What a great pick that was. Because David Ojabo suffered an Achilles injury on, I don't know what day it was, but it was at his pro day. I believe it was in March. So he's obviously not going to be ready to play the first week of the season. I would be shocked if he plays at all this season. But the talent and ability is there. He's one of those athletic freaks that you can't teach that type of athleticism. And he's one of the guys you want on your team. So, the pass rush is going to be shored up in the short term. So I'm excited about that as well. The only pick I don't like, and I still don't understand, the Ravens were the first team to draft a punter this draft in the 4th round.
Yeah, don't you guys still have Cook?
Well, apparently he's on his way out because you don't need 2 punters.
No, normally you don't.
So I don't even remember this dude. What is this dude's name? The draft. I mean, it's not the punt god from San Diego State. It's not that guy. It's somebody else.
Oh, yeah. I think the punt god from San Diego State went to Buffalo. I think they took him in like
Bills
the 5th round, maybe.
Oh.
Yeah. But what are you gonna do? Let's also talk a little bit about the Eagles because the Eagles didn't have a great draft considering the draft capital that they had exiting the 2021 season. There's all this talk about, they got 3 first-round picks, but they traded 2 of them and wound up with only 1 first-round pick, and I wasn't really that impressed with who they took. But they did turn one of those first-round picks into A.J. Brown, which, it's a pretty good wide receiver to get for your quarterback room there. What do you guys think about that decision by the Eagles to get A.J. Brown, who's on the last leg of his rookie deal, and for the Titans to ship him away?
Well, I think that for the Eagles, we talked about this a little bit on the show. It's put up or shut up time for Jalen Hurts. This is year 3 for him, and the Eagles want to do their due diligence to make sure that he has a quote-unquote fair opportunity to show whether or not he's the guy. And as long as you don't have a good receiving core, which the Eagles did not, all they had was Devontae Smith, who had a nice rookie year, was impressive at times, but it's a lot to ask for him to be the guy that carries your receiving core. Jalen Reagor. Yeah, he's massive Kate Upton there. So I think that this was a move to say, okay, here's the offense, and if Jalen Hurts is the guy, our offense is going to be really good. And if he's not, then we know he's not, and we'll find somebody else. So I think it's a good move for them to get some clarity with their quarterbacking situation. And I guess for the Titans, this feels like a bit of a money-saving move. We talked about this as well last Thursday. They trapped with Ryan Tannehill. Derrick Henry's obviously earning quite a bit of money, and rightfully so. They've paid a lot of defensive players that weren't really that good. They signed Bud Dupree, who was pretty good for them last year. They've got cap issues, and A.J. Brown was going to demand, rightfully so, a pretty top-of-the-market contract, given the fact that he's a top 10 receiver in all of football, and he's a huge part of what they do. So they opted to sort of restart the clock on that by drafting, I think they drafted Treylon Burks, who is most commonly comped to A.J. Brown. So they're figuring we'll get a rookie version of him, hope he turns out to be as good, but it's worth the risk of him not to save the money, which is what they did.
Yep.
Yeah, that sums it up perfectly.
I
I
think so too. Also on the Eagles, after the draft ended, they picked up my boy Carson Strong as an undrafted free agent.
Your number 2 overall quarterback.
My number one overall quarterback. I had him. I thought that
Pickett had him over Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, I thought that Pickett was probably the smarter quarterback to take in the first round of the draft just because of the injury history. But I think that Carson Strong is the better quarterback. I think that he's going to be, as long as the injuries can stay at bay. You can never really predict medical issues and how they're going to rear themselves. And after the draft, I did do a little bit of additional reading. When I was doing my pre-draft prep, I spent so much time watching film, I really didn't have a whole lot of time to read a lot of other documentation about the players. So I wasn't aware of just how severe the knee issues had been for Carson Strong in the past. The understanding that I had was that he had a corrective surgery for a issue that he had, not necessarily an injury, but a structural issue with his knees, and it was supposed to take 12 months to heal to a point that he could just go about like normal everyday life, much less physical activities like college football. But after 6 months, he was playing quarterback for the University of Nevada. And so with that knowledge and seeing what I saw on the field in the tape, I was blown away. I'm like, if this dude is like, only 50% of the way to fully recovered from this injury or from this surgery, imagine what he's going to be when he has a whole offseason to complete that recovery and come back as strong as ever. He's going to be money.
Pun intended.
What I didn't know at the time was that this has apparently been a recurring thing. This is the second time he's had a surgery for, it seems, the same issue with the knees, which could suggest that this may rear itself again in the future. It might not. Maybe this last surgery was more successful and he's going to be good to go, in which case the Eagles just got a hell of a steal, in my opinion. Even if you don't subscribe to my opinion that he's the number 1 quarterback in the draft, even if he is, the number 3 or 4 quarterback in this draft, to get him undrafted for, I think they signed him for like $380,000 or something like that. Like, that's a bargain for, a decent young quarterback to add to a room that has two guys who have a lot of talent, have some potential, but are kind of unproven with Jalen Hurts and Gardner Minshew.
Gardner Minshew.
I call that a win for the Eagles, much to my chagrin, because I do not like the Eagles.
I certainly think it's a win for the Eagles, but Hugh Jackson hasn't come over to my house to watch the tape on Carson Strong. So
you had 4 days since our last show.
Yeah, he was
to watch
so
some
far
tape.
down the board.
You should have watched some tape. I'm telling you, this dude, if he can stay healthy, is gonna be good.
Okay, well, I will watch the tape. I'll send an invite out to Hugh Jackson. I will watch the tape and report back on next week's show.
So I did a little bit of research. I didn't bother to watch tape because who has time for that after the draft? I mean, do enough of that before the draft. But I went to Pro Football Focus just to see how they graded some of these quarterbacks.
Oh, I remember you telling me about that.
Well, I told you about Football Outsiders, which is a statistical-based model. Pro Football Focus is, that's watching every play.
Yeah.
And so they had a group of, categories that they graded each guy by, and Kenny Pickett led the way with 5 categories of being, the best passer. But Carson Strong did win one category. He was rated as the best at a 70.7 PFF passing grade when throwing into tight windows. Strong went 78 of 158 for 892 yards, 16 touchdowns, and just 6 pickies against tight coverage. Delivered for a class-leading 84.7 passer rating. So
yeah, I mean, and that's not particularly surprising to me based on just what I observed and what I talked about the other day. Which my favorite quality about Carson Strong was that he throws it away from defenders. So wherever the defender is, he's going to put it in a place where he can't get to it. Sometimes his receiver also is not going to get to it, but that's part of throwing away from defenders. I appreciate that, but he is so accurate that most of the time the ball is within reach of his receiver, even in those situations. So that's, one of several things that I like about him, but that is the number one thing that kind of has me confident that if he can stay healthy, he's going to be good in the NFL. And I hope that by some miracle he winds up not doing all that for the Eagles. Hopefully he'll do it for a different team. I want to talk a little bit, just briefly, get some thoughts from you guys. I want to go first because I'm hosting this week and because I don't want you guys to step on my toes with my favorite draft. But I want to find out who you guys think kind of drafted the best out of all the teams in the NFL. And for me, it's got to be the Jets, just based on those top 4 players that they took. They got 3 first-round picks, and with them, they took Sauce Gardner at number 4, arguably the best cornerback in the draft, and at worst, the number 2 cornerback in the draft. They took Garrett Wilson at 10, who, for my money, is the best wide receiver in the draft. They took Jermaine Johnson the second at 26, who, I think was somewhere around like my number 5 defensive end in the draft, but a lot of DEs had already been taken by that point. Honestly, at 26, I was surprised that he had fallen that far, and I think that he was probably the best player available at that point. And then with the 36th pick early in the second round, they took Breece Hall, who is my number 1 running back of the draft out of Iowa State. So I just based on those 4 players, they got 4 really, really good young players. Zach Wilson is still a huge question mark. Who knows, how much having Garrett Wilson there is going to help him in the passing game. Who knows, just how good Breece Hall will. I think Breece Hall is going to be pretty good as a rookie. A lot of running backs can step in and be productive as rookies in the NFL. But who knows how much pressure he's going to take off of Zach Wilson and how much that'll help him. I still have a lot of questions about the Jets' offensive line. And whether they can even protect Zach Wilson enough for us to find out just how good or bad he can be. But the Jets are going to be really interesting to watch this year. I think they're going to make a little bit of noise. I think they're probably going to make a run to be around 500 this year if everybody can stay healthy. I think that these kinds of pieces can help them to be in that 6 and 9 to 7 and 8 range.
All right. They're going to play 2 fewer games than everybody else?
What's that?
They're going to play 2 fewer games than everybody else?
Oh, I'm sorry. So I'm still getting used to the 17 game schedule.
Yeah, you
I mean,
had them playing
I think
15.
our audience is used to your math skills right now. So there's that. But I was Corey. But I was
yes,
going to ask.
but I think they're going to be, they might not be right at or even just above 500, but I think they're going to be within, 2 or 3 games of 500 this year for sure with this roster.
Okay. I was going to ask you. I mean, do you think the Jets can get all the way up to second place in their division? Can they pass the Dolphins?
I'm not going to put it outside of the range of possibilities for them to pass the Dolphins. I think my biggest concern would be the Patriots, because even though the Patriots had a terrible draft, they've still got Bill Belichick.
Yes, they did.
Mac Jones is, still a decent quarterback. He played pretty well this past year, and I think he'll probably improve as a sophomore. The Patriots have a lot of issues, and
I think one of them might be Bill Belichick, to be honest.
I mean,
he's buying the groceries.
I don't know.
Bill Belichick, the GM, is hurting Bill Belichick, the coach, again. It's been a rejoinder for like a decade now.
That could be the case, but still, Bill Belichick, the coach, is good enough that he can overcome Bill Belichick, the GM, and at least finish in second place in the division. I feel like, but
the Patriots are the team I have the least confidence in.
But it's going to be really interesting to see what the Jets do. And the bottom line is they're going to be competitive even in a lot of the games that they lose. And that's why they're going to be fun to watch. Even if they're not at 500,
they're going to be competent.
They're going to feel like a 500 team because they're going to be in a lot of their games, I think.
Yeah. Mike Greenberg was just gleeful. He couldn't contain himself with how good the Jets were looking. Like, what? The Jets are doing
we still need to see them on the field, to be clear.
That's true.
But
on paper,
there's a lot. There's a lot to be excited about following this draft.
I still think the Jets are finishing in last place, but that's not because I think they suck or that they had a bad draft. I think it's because that division's pretty tough, right? Like I think we all agree the Bills are the best team. The Patriots showed that they're certainly going to win a lot of games that they're not supposed to because they're the Patriots. That's what they do. And I don't think we can sleep on the Dolphins. I think the addition of Tyreek Hill is big. Yeah. I think Jalen Waddle
was a beast this past year.
Yeah, he looked great in the second half of this year or the previous season.
And the Dolphins defense,
him to make a jump.
The Dolphins defense is probably the most opportunistic in the NFL. So I think the real question for the Dolphins comes down to Tua and what he does.
Yeah, and I think that Tua will be better this year because, 1, better receiving core, 2, it's year 3, and 3, he's actually got a coach that seemingly believes in him, or at least is being forced to, right? Like Brian Flores, we've had mostly good things to say about him, but one thing we didn't say about him, whether it's good or bad, is he sure as hell didn't believe in Tua. So having an offensive-minded coach to work with you and potentially give you some confidence along with your team, I think the Dolphins are going to be competitive. And they were competitive last year, so I feel like the Jets are just kind of stuck in a really tough situation, and they're on the ascent, assuming Zach Wilson is the real deal, which I'm not inclined to believe.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing when we're talking about Jets versus Dolphins is that, while we could absolutely be wrong and he could make a huge jump in his sophomore year, we have to kind of assume right now that Tua is still going to be better than Zach Wilson next year.
Based on what we've seen, yeah, I agree.
Right.
So again, that's not an indictment of what the Jets did. I agree with you fully, Corey. In fact, you were worried about somebody stepping on your toes, so you went and stepped on mine. I would have said the Jets as well. I thought their draft was excellent. It's just a matter of, can the Jets organization turn that into something positive and maintain it? That historically has not been the case. But historically, that's not been the case because they don't have good quarterbacks. And if Zach Wilson proves and bucks that trend, then problem solved. They're going to be a good team eventually.
So since I stepped on your toes already, Eric, what other team impressed you with their draft?
I mean, I was going to say the Ravens. We haven't talked about them a little bit, but I agree with most people that viewed the Ravens draft as an extreme success, especially given the fact that they didn't really make a ton of moves to go make a splash. They stayed where they were. They let the Saints and other people get in front of them. I thought that everybody was worried about, they didn't get Jordan Davis. I thought that was a blessing in disguise, especially because they got Kyle Hamilton instead. I thought that they made great selections where they did, and they didn't give up anything additional to do it. They made the right moves. I thought that trading Hollywood Brown, because I consider that part of the draft process, is gaining additional picks, I thought that was a good trade because Evan said that, and I agree with him. I don't think Hollywood Brown's that good. He's just a guy. I think that Rashad Bateman is going to make a step forward this year. I thought Rashad Bateman looked better than Hollywood Brown did last year. Like he looked like
catches the ball.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
He gets open, he catches the ball. That's kind of what you want. And
dude moved the chains every time. It was great. Loved it.
So and the thing is, like Evan said, I don't think the Ravens are necessarily need to be built around having a strong receiving core. They just need one or two guys that can make plays because they've got the running backs, they've got the tight ends, they've got Lamar Jackson. And the one thing that Lamar does not necessarily excel at is always throwing outside the numbers. He's a little bit inconsistent with that. So why cast pearls before swine and say, hey, let's run an offense where we've got a bunch of speed demons on the outside and the quarterback who's great at literally everything else can't always hit them.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say the Ravens had a great draft as well, but I'm biased. Shout out to the Giants who had 2 first-round picks as well.
And they didn't mess those up either. They did
my goodness. Kayvon Thibodeau. Ooh, Lordy. I was dreaming if the Ravens got him at 14. I mean, obviously that wasn't going to happen, but it could happen, right? And then they got Evan Neal, the offensive lineman out of Alabama. Like they drafted possibly 2 cornerstone pieces of their team. And, I mean, when your whole team is garbage, obviously you need everything, but they got the key ingredients.
Yeah, no, I mean, how about those 2 New York teams? A lot of times we get to make fun of them on draft day, and this year, no, we got to sing their praises because they did their job and they did it well. So good for them.
They crushed it. It was great.
Let's move on. Let's talk a little bit of NBA. Playoffs are in full swing. We are now into the second round, the conference semifinals. Let's start with the East and the Heat and the 76ers. Miami won game 1, 106-92. Potentially, probably playing into that was the fact that Joel Embiid missed the first game. He was out with a facial fracture and a concussion. He's already been ruled out for game 2. There is hope that he could return for game 3, but Eric, talk to me a little bit about that and not just Joel Embiid's injury, of course, but also what this means for the series, because without him out, the Heat have a decisive advantage in game 2. And if Miami goes up 2-0, do you think that the 76ers can come back even if Embiid comes back for game 3?
Well, there's a lot going on here beyond just is Embiid going to be there. It's also is Embiid going to be effective. He's got a broken face. I mean, that's definitely not something you want to step on the floor with and feel comfortable. Not to mention, I think that a lot of times when players suffer a more severe sounding or recent injury, we forget about the other injury, and he is still playing with a torn ligament in his thumb. So he's going to be dealing with 2 injuries when he returns, probably for game 3. My bigger concern is I didn't think that Philly would have won this series even if Embiid was completely healthy. I think Miami's the better team. They obviously have home court advantage. And I think that Doc Rivers ain't the guy to coach your way to stealing a win on the road here. I mean, we saw him insist on playing DeAndre Jordan yesterday, and the Sixers were up by 1 at the half yesterday. And they were plus 13 in the 20 minutes that DeAndre Jordan didn't play and was a minus 12 in the 4 minutes that he did play. So Doc Rivers' answer was to play him even more in the second half, which is baffling. And then when he was asked about it later, he said, we're going to keep playing DeAndre Jordan. And I'm like, why? He's terrible. He hasn't been good in a long time. And
I didn't know he was still in the league.
Yeah, exactly. He's been passed around multiple times in the last few years. Some of the coaches that either got fired or should have gotten fired noticed he couldn't play anymore and got rid of him. Those being Frank Vogel and Steve Nash. So I don't understand why Doc Rivers thinks this guy's a solution at all. Just play small, bite the bullet, and deal with it. And the other thing is, James Harden, we've talked about him a lot this year, about how he's not the same guy. Well, it's a lot harder to be asked to be that guy when your best player's out. So now James Harden has to assume the role of being the best player on the floor, and he's not anymore. Jimmy Butler, at this point, is a better player than James Harden. I wouldn't have said that 2 or 3 years ago, but I'm saying that now. And with the fact that the Heat also have probably the second best player in the series without Embiid on the floor, and that being Bam Adebayo, the talent level is just a totally different ball game when it comes to Miami. Not to mention they've got the much better coach, the much better culture. They're much more established. I just don't see how they're going to pull this series off, especially with 2 games probably being punts, given the fact that they don't have their star player.
And the Heat earned the 1 seed for a reason. Like, they're good. I think that, you can't undersell that.
Yeah, absolutely. The other series in the East going on, the Bucks and the Celtics also 1 game in. The Bucks won game 1 by 12 points, 101-89. Marcus Smart got hurt about halfway through the first game with a quad contusion, and he's already been ruled out for game 2. There is a 3-day layover between games 2 and 3, so like with Philly, there is some hope that Marcus Smart could be back for game 3, but likewise, his team is in the hole. And I'm wondering, Eric, how big of a factor is his absence going to play in game 2? Do you feel like this kind of also makes this almost a punt and gives the Bucks the 2-0 lead going into game 3?
Well, no, because Boston's up by 25 points at the half in game 2.
Oh, so well, there you go.
Clearly, that's not an issue. I think that Marcus Smart's obviously won Defensive Player of the Year. He's a terrific perimeter defender. He's become that team's established point guard, which is something that they seemingly didn't want to do for the first 5-6 years of his career. They're always looking for that guy as the point guard, whether it was Kemba Walker or whoever else they could bring in. And then they finally just said, screw it, let's let Smart do it. And it paid dividends because that team is impossible to hunt anybody on defense because all of their perimeter players can play defense if Marcus Smart's in the lineup. So he's a big loss there. Obviously, you hope he's back for game 3. I'm pretty sure I haven't been able to watch what's happened in game 2. Obviously, the Celtics are kicking ass, but that probably is an aberration. It's hard to believe that they would go from getting their asses kicked at home to suddenly being this much better than the Bucks. It feels like there's some answer in between, and I'm curious to see how those games in Milwaukee are going to go because the Bucks have already taken home court advantage. They didn't need this one. Boston was the more desperate team. It clearly looks like they came out and showed it because, like I said, they're up 25 points at the half. But I think that there was a little bit of a wake-up call with the Celtics where I think that we sort of talked about them as, oh, this team is probably going to win the East, right? But the problem is I think people got a little too caught up in the fact that they swept the Nets when, one, yeah, they swept them, but every game was pretty competitive. And two, the Nets aren't good. Like, we had this idea that the Nets were somehow good because they're the preseason favorites and they had KD and Kyrie. That team stunk. Like, that team was clearly every bit of the 7 seed that they earned. And the Celtics did what a 2 seed should do to a 7 seed, and that's sweep them. But now they're going up against the Bucks with the reigning Finals MVP, probably the best player in the world, and it's a different ballgame. It's much more difficult to pull this off, and the Bucks are going to make the Celtics do something that they probably don't love to do, which is shoot a bunch of threes. And looks like tonight they're making it, but they sure as hell weren't making them in game 1. We'll see if they can be consistent with that. If they can, they have a shot at winning the series. If they're not, then they're going to get beat.
Out in the West, we got the Suns and the Mavs. Every series in the second round is just 1 game in right now. Suns won game 1 against Dallas, 121-114, the highest scoring game of the first game of the second round. Luka Doncic scored 45 points for Dallas in game 1, and his team lost by 7. What does Dallas need to do to get competitive in this series, or are they doomed? Is there nothing they can do?
Well, they need to play better defense. I mean, this is a team that became a contender this year because their defense really turned it around. Like, they were a poor defensive team the previous seasons, which is why they were a lower seed, despite the fact that they had Luka and some other good offensive players. But this year, their defense really picked up. So even though they traded Kristaps Porzingis, even though they lost Tim Hardaway Jr. to a broken foot around the midseason mark, the team was still able to win a bunch of games because they were locking people down. And that's a credit to Jason Kidd and what he was able to do this year as the first-year head coach in Dallas. but that wasn't there. It looked like they got blitzed a little bit early. Phoenix did the same thing against New Orleans, where they just came out in the first quarter and blew you off the floor, and you were playing catch up for the rest of the game. As for Luka, I don't think that performance is a particularly great one at all. He took a gajillion shots, and he was looking like he was going to have a very inefficient night until the Suns were up by 20 points, and they kind of took their foot off the gas, and Luka cashed in garbage time. So I don't think that this is a good way to play for them at all. I think that Luka has some flaws that people don't want to acknowledge. They see the fact that he scores 45 points and picks up 8 assists and has 12 rebounds, and oh my God, Luka Doncic is the best player in the world. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, yeah, well, when you take all the shots, you're going to have a lot of points. What do you do for everybody else? How do you improve the team as a whole? If you're just the guy that constantly has the ball in his hands, then all that happens is you end up losing a playoff series, and all of your defenders say, well, he has no help. Well, guess what? The help won 2 playoff games for him when he was sitting on his ass. So you can't tell me this Mavericks team is incapable without him. You look at the on-off numbers from the regular season, Luka Doncic was only – the team was only 0.2 points per 100 possessions better with Luka on the floor than without. They were basically the same. That doesn't mean to say that Luka's not good. It's to say that this team
he's not a
around
difference
him is pretty
maker
good
for them, really.
It says that there is a deep team there, that the bench unit can go win you some minutes in a way that you don't expect for a team that, quote unquote, provides the superstar no help. I don't buy that for a minute. Is it a perfect team? No. Could he use a star teammate that complements him? Sure. But it's hard to find a star teammate that complements you when you have the ball all the time. Because how do you become a star? By having the ball in your hands. There's a handful that could pull it off, but they're not really available. So I think Luka still needs to adjust his game. He's still young. He's still great. But he needs to develop some type of threat when he doesn't have the ball in his hands. So that way his teammates can potentially thrive and he can help complement their games as much as they're expected to complement his.
Well, yeah, and the other thing there is, when you're talking about complementing somebody's game, if you have the ball all the time, the only complement to that is to have the ball none of the time. And I don't see how any other star player you could pair with him could have the ball any less than his teammates already do.
Yeah, you basically reduce any type of big man to being a rim running type like a JaVale McGee where you throw lobs to him. And I'm sorry, but Giannis Antetokounmpo ain't signing up for that. Or you reduce some outside shooter to basically play like exclusively like Kyle Korver or somebody like that. Like even Klay Thompson, whose primary value is a catch and shoot 3-point shooter, even he likes to have the ball in his hand to do a little bit of work. He doesn't like to just stand around. He expects people to, hit him in certain positions and have that communication. It can't just be, well, Luka's going to do his thing and you stand over here and if he passes you the ball, try to make the shot. That's not going to fly for anybody with a pedigree.
Yeah. Jumping over to the last series of the conference semis, the Warriors and the Grizzlies. Speaking of Klay Thompson with the Golden State Warriors, they won Game 1 by a point, 117-116. A really exciting final several minutes of that game. Draymond Green got ejected for a flagrant 2 foul midway through the game and missed the rest of the game. And it was a dogfight down to the end. Ja Morant had the last shot. Had a fairly clean opportunity. It was defended, but he got the shot up pretty cleanly. I've seen him make that shot before and didn't fall for him. But as physical of a game as that was, Steve Kerr says that Game 2 coming up will be the most physical game that they've played all year. What are your thoughts on that comment by Steve Kerr and what we can expect from the rest of, what seems on paper and to be shaping up to be maybe the best series out of the 3 or out of the 4 for the conference semis?
Well, I feel like Memphis lost an opportunity to win one here that they kind of had to win. I feel like losing Game 1 when you're the home team is a killer because now this is house money for Golden State tonight. If they win, the series is basically over. You can't lose both of your home games and then have to travel down 2-0. That's just not going to work. So I expect Memphis to be very desperate tonight, which is why I kind of have the expectation that they're going to win tonight because they need to. That being said, losing Game 1 when the whistle was going your way the entire night and Draymond Green got tossed from the game before halftime and the call was probably a little bit overzealous to throw him out of the game for that. That's not going to happen again. Klay Thompson bricked a lot of open shots.
Yeah,
That's probably not going to happen.
He missed 2 free throws in clutch time.
Yes, these things happened. I don't think Jaren Jackson is going to shoot 6 of 9 from 3. Ja was unusually effective hitting his shots from the outside. They had this game where their offense had an explosion, and they still lost. And the main reason they lost is because they simply don't have an answer to guard all of these shooters that Golden State has. Like we talked about, Klay Thompson, he had a bad shooting night. It wasn't because he didn't have open looks. It was just because he wasn't hitting them tonight or that night. And Steph Curry was good but not great as a shooter. He hit his threes at a high clip, but he missed a couple of shots that you would normally expect him to make. The problem is you need all 3 of their shooters because they've got Jordan Poole now, and he was the guy all damn night. When he came into the game, he scored, 31 points on 20 shots? He was ruthless.
That's insane
and they couldn't
efficiency.
do anything about it. And it's not just the fact that these guys could all shoot. Like Klay Thompson, as he was struggling a bit, he showed a little bit of his ability to pass the ball, which is sort of something that he forgets about. But I was glad to see it because when you're struggling to shoot, you got to be willing to give up the rock when you're double teamed. But we know Steph can do that. We know Jordan Poole can do that. And we know Draymond Green can do that. But I feel like Golden State is definitely the better team when everybody's on the floor. I feel like Memphis has shown their youth time and time again. They showed it against Minnesota. Minnesota just showed it even more on their side. That's not going to happen against Golden State. There's a steely resolve to this team where even if they're not playing well, even if things aren't going their way, even if the refs are calling charges on blatant blocks and then not overturning them for no apparent reason and making up rules to enforce a charge that didn't exist. I mean, these things don't typically happen. And counting on that to be there to bail you out and then still not winning the game, that's an indictment. That says to me that they're not going to win this series. I feel like Golden State's got this. It's not going to be a 4 or 5 game series. At least I don't think so, unless they lose tonight. But I can't see Memphis beating this team 4 out of 6 times. It's just not realistic.
I think that's all that I had to talk about with the NBA. But Eric, any final thoughts to wrap up our discussion on that before we move on to baseball?
Yeah, I guess I got to give Steve Kerr some props. I've given him a hard time on this podcast before, but he made some tremendous adjustments in that game. I mean, you lose your second best player, your biggest defensive impact player, like before the half, and you managed to get it together, and they started Gary Payton. Gary Payton was a difference maker. They made sure to have Jordan Poole in the lineup. They effectively let Ja Morant go at people. He let Stephen Curry defend Ja Morant on one of the biggest plays of the game, and Steph owned him. Like, that was the final outcome. There was 36 seconds left. The Grizzlies came off the floor, had the ball down 1. Ja
Taking
had
their
Steph
time,
on ice.
by the way. Why were they not trying to take advantage of a 2-for-1 opportunity there?
I don't know. That's a good question. It might be because they felt that taking a shot within 5 or 6 seconds would have been just such a bad shot that it's not even worth the endeavor.
Which is weird because don't shooting percentages go down after the first 10 seconds of a possession in the NBA?
I mean, it obviously depends on how your set turns out, but yeah, typically in the later moments of the shot clock, you're going to get worse shots, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get a great shot at the beginning of the shot clock. Then you're just going to run down the floor and chuck one.
Yeah.
And you can do that when you've got prolific shooting, but Ja Morant is not that guy. You don't want him pulling up from 35 just to save you a couple of ticks on the clock to give you another short possession later on. I understand saying there's 36 seconds left. I can split this 6 and 6, or I can get a full 24 to get a good look and then trust my defense if I get the bucket. They got what they wanted. They got Steph Curry on Ja Morant, and Steph ate his lunch. So that's it. Like Ja Morant probably would have been salivating. He would have been dancing all over the floor. He would have been saying, he can't guard me, talking all that ish if you got that bucket. Well, he didn't. He went up against a guy that's a lot better than him and still is, and he has to eat it now. So hopefully he can bounce back game 2 and make this series interesting. But if he doesn't, again, he's going to have to eat it.
All right. Let's move on to baseball and start with my Yankees because I'm hosting this week. Yankees on a 10-game winning streak that they're putting on the line tonight in Toronto. They got an AL best plus 42 run differential entering tonight. They've got the best record in baseball right now. Just 67 runs allowed this season, which is better than anybody but the Dodgers, who have only given up a ridiculous 55 runs this season. The Yankees pitching has really been good this year, and the bats have still been kind of iffy at times. They've had a decent run these last 10 days, but most importantly, the pitching is keeping them in games. We haven't had to have our batters keep our pitchers in games for a change, which is nice. I definitely appreciate that. So the big story, though, this week for the Yankees was that they arrived in Toronto, across the border for those of our geographically challenged fans out there, where you are required to be vaccinated to enter the country. And every single Yankee made it into Canada. And this was a little bit surprising because back during spring training, Aaron Judge, among other players, were either, openly unvaccinated or were very cagey, as was the case with Aaron Judge, with their answers, not really wanting to say whether or not they were vaccinated, which, 9 times out of 10 means that you're not vaccinated. Most people who are vaccinated aren't shy about sharing that information. So
yeah, I wear my vaccine card taped to my forehead.
So
care,
it was a little bit surprising to see that. I'm glad to see that. Assuming it does mean that they got vaccinated, that they're not up there with fake vaccine cards, because then that's a huge problem.
That's a Novak Djokovic problem.
That's a
right?
crime.
Somebody's going to get dumped in the ocean.
Yeah. So, and they're going to deserve it. So,
absolutely.
But good for them for actually getting vaccinated, because we need these games. We got the best record in baseball right now. Yes, we're on a 10-game winning streak right now. But, the Yankees, for the past several years, we have seen them go on, runs in the middle of the season that look like this. And it doesn't matter whether that 10-game run happens early in the season, middle of the season, late in the season. If the rest of your season is poop, then where are you going to be in October? So they have to keep this going, and especially against good teams like the Blue Jays, who, a lot of people going into the season might have expected to eat their lunch in a series like this, myself included. So, they won the first game of the series, which is big. Hopefully they can continue their success in that series these next couple days.
Well, I will do everybody a favor and go ahead and rain on your Yankees parade here. So the Yankees won 10 games in a row. Like you said, they won 3 against Cleveland, 3 against Baltimore, 3 against Kansas City, and 1 against Toronto. So, those are all terrible teams, except for the 1 win last night by 1 run against the Blue Jays. So, if you're the Yankees, you probably should win all of those. So it's hard to win 10 in a row playing baseball, but if you're ever going to win 10 in a row, these would be the 10 to win in a row.
That's fair.
It's Cupcake City. My goodness. Cleveland doesn't have any players. We've been through how bad the Orioles stink, and Kansas City doesn't have any players either. So,
Yeah, but you also have to acknowledge, though, that last year's Yankees would have lost probably 4 of those games. Like they were dropping games to anybody that was willing to take them.
And I was gonna make that argument too, Eric. But at the same time, like Evan said, if you're a good team, which the Yankees claim to be, want to be, then you need to win those games. You can't lose 4 of those. You could understand losing 2 of those games for sure, but you can't go 6-4 against that schedule.
Yeah, I guess what I'm gonna say is, nobody's betting lines are moving for the Yankees to win the World Series just because they won 10 games against mostly crummy teams in April and May. So, clearly this is not something that's going to say, oh, well, now they're going to win the NL or the AL pennant. It'd be really impressive if they won the NL pennant. At this point,
the Astros did it. They won both.
They look like a team that we thought that they were, which is a playoff team. I think that we all think that they're going to make the postseason. I don't think any of us picked them to win the division. I think We either picked the Blue Jays or the
we
Rays.
We didn't pick them to win the division, and none of us picked them to be in the World Series.
Right. So this is sort of, but we did pick them to make the Blue Jays.
Yes.
So this is sort of a reflection of what we come to expect from the Yankees, is that they're going to have a stretch like this where they look really good against some crummy teams. We need to see it against better teams if we're going to sit there and change the way we feel about the Yankees. And even then, you don't really know, because the Yankees pitching is probably not as good as it looks so far. I mean, Garrett Cole's great, and I think, Luis Severino
can't hit.
Has been better. Maybe he's back, I guess, but that's still only two guys. I mean, I don't have the same faith in that rotation.
We're going to see more of the Yankees. They got 2 more against Toronto this week. They got 2 more against Toronto next week, and then they go to Chicago to play the White Sox for 4 games.
Yeah.
So
they're going to get tested.
Yeah. But then they've got 7 games against the Orioles. Oh, jeez.
That should be fun.
Speaking of
the Orioles, the O's took 2 out of 3 from the Red Sox over the weekend, including the Saturday night game, which we all were in attendance at. Now, was this
No, 2 of us were.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Evan was not there. Eric, Andrew, and I were at that game. Eric,
usually people forget I was at stuff. They don't forget that I wasn't there. So
I'm so used to you being there when I go to Orioles games, Evan.
I wanted to go, right? But it was my grandmother's birthday, so I couldn't go.
Was that only the second game that you've been to for the Orioles this year, Eric?
Only the second. It's been 25 games?
No, I know, but
how am I supposed to go?
No, but I mean, was that just the second game that you've been to?
Yeah, that was only my second game this year.
So both Eric and I have been to exactly 2 Orioles games this year. They were the same 2, and in both games, the Orioles won in extra innings in a walk-off situation because of a terrible play by the opposing pitcher. A couple weeks ago, it was the Yankees and Aroldis Chapman walking in the winning run like a bonehead.
Walking in a guy who was 0 for 5.
What are you doing? What are we doing? And then on Saturday night,
shared a stat.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Evan.
Ryan Blake shared a stat on Twitter that the Orioles are batting 0 in extra innings, and they've won both games.
Right. It's ridiculous. So then Saturday comes, and I forget the name of the pitcher for the Red Sox, but he's got the Orioles in I
think it's Sawamura.
Yeah, Sawamura. He immediately intentionally walked the first batter of the inning to set up a runners on first and second situation. And on a bunt to the next hitter, he goes up, feels the ball, decides he's going to try and get the out at third base, and he absolutely airmails it a good, 6 to 10 feet over the third baseman's head, easily. And the run scores all the way from second. Like, the most hilarious sequence ever. And I'm like, how did I manage to be here for both of these games? I'm not even an Orioles fan. I'm not supposed to be at any of these games. And I was at both of them.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, so it was a really terrible bunt, which kind of helped the Orioles in this situation. So,
he didn't know what to do with it.
Chirinos was the catcher, the Orioles catcher, who bunted the ball, and he popped it up. So, the runner on second had to freeze. So then once the ball landed, the runner had to then try to get to third, which made it such an easy play for Sawamura to throw to third. He just made such a terrible throw that, the runner from second came all the way around to score. He threw it down the left field line.
It was away from everybody. There was no way that anybody could get to it by the time that I forget who was on second at the time.
Mateo or something.
Yeah, I think it was Jorge Mateo who came around to score. I think he was.
But when they
brought him in to pinch run.
Imagine your job is to throw a baseball, and you do it that badly. It's mind-boggling to me. Eric, did you ever have any issues when you were pitching, throwing to bases?
Oh no, we worked on pitcher fielding practice all the time. Like, this was required. This
So
is
it
part of
doesn't
pregame.
throw you completely off when you're not throwing gas at the plate?
No, because I've played baseball beyond just pitching. I've thrown the ball to somebody before, right? Like, it's not that hard. You look at the target.
But you weren't in the major leagues, though.
I was not in the show. No, if I was, I probably wouldn't be doing this. I'd be making a lot more money doing something more fun. But it doesn't matter.
I am offended. This is not fun.
I'm not saying this is fun, but playing baseball for money is more fun. Jeez, y'all getting a little defensive here on the Sports Ballers podcast. We're here talking about sports because we can't play them. That's the whole idea.
Speak for yourself. I won the faculty dodgeball game today.
Good for you. But no, I never had any issues with making throws to bases. I had a thought process when I did it, because I could see where it's sort of an awkward position for a pitcher because he has to turn and throw, whereas the other infielders kind of just have to pick the ball up and they're already facing the bag. But it's pretty straightforward. Just don't pop up. Don't field the ball. Don't pop up, and then because once you pop up, that's when you airmail it. Just stay low, stay in a flex position, turn, look at your target, and throw the ball. But I'm a guy who played high school baseball. I shouldn't have to tell a professional how to do this. This should be old hat to them. But apparently,
a major leaguer.
It's a
not
struggle.
Even a professional.
Yeah. Like the best players in the world play in this league, and that includes this guy. And he threw the ball well over his head. As soon as he threw it, I was like, "Oh, we won." The ball didn't even have to get it was maybe 4 or 5 feet out of his hand. I was like, "Well, that's not getting caught." I was like, "My goodness, that was
caught by the left fielder."
Yeah, I was like, "That's gonna be rolling down the line. That's gonna be a win. You can actually go home before the 11th this time."
So overall, it was a nice series for the Orioles. Won the series against the Red Sox like they won an earlier series against the Yankees, though the Yankees did come back and sweep the Orioles in the subsequent series. So I get the last laugh there, at least until the next series when you guys probably take 2 of 3 there.
See, we were at one of the losses for y'all, though. So we're the Orioles. You're supposed to sweep us both times.
Yeah.
We're supposed to go 19-0 against you.
Yeah. The Yankees have no business not winning 19 of the 19 games against the Orioles, right? Like, hang your head in shame forever. You lost the series to these Orioles, right? This cast of characters, the island of misfit toys, just the guys who got voted off that island, right, are playing for the Orioles right now. So, you lose the Orioles. Are you an actual baseball team right now? Like, what is that?
Adley Rutschman and DL Hall are in Bowie for a rehab assignment, AA level. So, unfortunately, I can't make it down to Bowie for a game this coming weekend. But I know Sean is trying to go to one of the games. I don't know if you guys are going to try and go with him for one of those games.
I want to, but it looks like it's going to rain.
Yeah, so you guys will have to keep an eye on the weather. But how close do you guys have a sense of how close Adley Rutschman is to making his debut in the show?
He is weeks away, right? If not days. Like, it should be soon.
I mean, that's pretty exciting that you guys
now.
will finally be able to not have Robinson Chirinos out there as basically your everyday catcher.
Oh, jeez. Yes, and Anthony Bemboom.
Love me some Bemboom.
Keeping the seat warm.
I feel like Chirinos is, he's an adequate, catcher to have on your roster as the backup, as the guy who comes in
37.
every few days when your starting catcher, needs to rest because it's too bad on their knees to have them out there every day. But he should not be your primary starter.
Yeah, Chirinos is a professional ball player. Like he plays adequately behind the plate.
Bunts on Saturday. What was that?
That was one play, and lots of professional basic
how often
bunt
is
like that
Robinson Chirinos asked to lay down a bunt? Like, come on.
Should be never, because bunts are dumb.
Yeah, bunts are dumb, and he's a catcher. I'm not going to hold that against him. He actually looks like he has a plan when he goes up to hit. Doesn't always get a hit, but he doesn't just flail at everything like Pedro Severino used to, right? So it's nice to actually have a grown-up in the clubhouse, even if he's no longer a particularly good baseball player. He still has, the makings of somebody who at once was a good baseball player. That's better than having just a complete bum who has never had any business ever being in the show.
I'm sure Pudge Rodriguez has some juice left. I mean, I should have called him.
Yeah, maybe he's got too much juice left.
Oh, I didn't mean to say that like that, but yeah.
Last thing that I want to bring up on the show, it's actually not on our sheet, but maybe one of the first things that we've seen Major League Baseball do that we can actually appreciate under the current commissioner, Robert Manfred, probably still wasn't quite long enough, but a 2-year suspension for Trevor Bauer for domestic violence. I believe that is the longest suspension that we have seen for domestic violence, or really for anything in baseball. 300 and what was it? 14 games.
24
games. Yeah, there's my math skills again. Big suspension for him. Definitely earned every game of that, and like I said, probably and then some. But I am glad to see this issue being taken a little bit more seriously, at least in this one case, and hopefully this will set a precedent both for baseball and for other sports to take this issue much more seriously going forward. I was and still am not happy that Luis Severino is currently on the Yankees roster, able to pitch. He should have been facing a suspension similar to this.
Thought it was Domingo.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Domingo Germán. Sorry. Let me not slander Luis Severino's name. Domingo Germán. The fact that he is on a roster and allowed to pitch is a problem to me. And I really want to see this become a more of a standard across sports. 2 years I feel like should be a minimum. If you can't keep your hands off of a woman or off of anybody in a violent way, you do not need to be playing sports. Period. Point blank. End of discussion, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think that Bauer's case in particular was particularly heinous given the fact that it was sexual in nature. I think that his behavior or alleged behavior is indefensible. And I think that this changes a lot of things because he was adamant that he was innocent, even though he clearly did something wrong. And he had actually filed a lawsuit against his accuser for basically accusing him of this. And if Major League Baseball decides, and again, this is Major League Baseball here, not
all of the sports leagues.
This isn't, this isn't some women's rights group. This is Major League Baseball. They decided to look into this, and they came away with the conclusion that you need to sit for 2 full seasons. I can't imagine you're clean. I really can't. Yeah. Like whatever you claim to have not done, or the situation or the circumstances or whatever that led to this accusation that were apparently untrue, I can't buy it.
Especially when you're a player of his caliber. Leagues bend over backwards to keep players of his caliber active on the field as much as possible, unless it's performance substances.
I will say that Major League Baseball certainly would not have any issue getting rid of Trevor Bauer, because Trevor Bauer runs his mouth about Major League Baseball and the commissioner all the time on Twitter.
Fair.
He is absolutely a malcontent when it comes to that. That being said, there's no way they did this based on that. They did this based on the merit of the case. And, oh, by the way, the fact that additional accusations have come out about Bauer behaving like this. I mean, we're talking about some really sinister stuff here. Like, we're not talking about
a pattern of behavior,
a misunderstanding. And it's really, really heinous behavior.
Oh,
so, if you want to read about it, you can, but I'm not going to say it on here. So, and again, it's given the fact that Trevor Bauer has also shown his ass on the field plenty of times, it's not exactly easy to believe him and his side of the story. It's just not.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that.
Yeah. So just wanted to conclude with that, and glad that baseball is taking a stand on that issue, and hopefully that precedent will continue in baseball, and hopefully it'll be taken up by other sports leagues, because I think that that issue is long overdue for some recognition and for some severe punishments toward players who engage in that sort of behavior. That is everything that we had on our show notes to discuss tonight. Any late breaking news going on right now? What's the status of that Boston game right now? Are they still up by 20 some points?
Yes, they're up by 20 points exactly. So Milwaukee shoot off 5 points of the 25-point halftime lead, but it's about midway through the third quarter. So Celtics are still very much in the driver's seat.
All right. So that, I think, pretty much brings us to the conclusion of episode 193 of the Sports Ballers podcast. If you missed this past Thursday's draft coverage, if you are so inclined, you can still find it on YouTube. We had 3 camera angles for the draft. We had all kinds of fancy graphics, and it was a really fun time. The 3 of us got in the same room and watched the draft on the TV while talking to you all. And we had a few of our listeners. We had quite a few listeners live during the show. We had a few who were interacting with us, which was great fun. We love interacting with our listeners. We wish that we got to do it more, including in our regular podcast. So if you're listening to this after the fact, try to join us live sometime. We're doing this on YouTube now. Really easy to jump in the comments section, and we see the comments as they come in, so we can respond to any thoughts that you have about what we're talking about. Just find us, the Sports Ballers, on YouTube. You can also like our Facebook page. You can follow us on Twitter at SportsBallers18. You can also catch us individually on Twitter. We're all pretty active on there. I'm at Cory Puffett. Eric is at Quagmire67, and Evan is at Evan_Ash13. You can send us an email. It's thesportsballers@gmail.com. With any sort of questions that you'd like to hear us answer on the show, topics you'd like to hear us discuss that maybe fall outside of our normal purview of topics that we cover. You can catch our podcast on pretty much all the major podcasters: Apple, Spotify, Google, and Amazon. If there's a podcast service that you use that we're not on and you prefer to listen to us on that platform, just let us know what it is, and we'll look into getting us over there. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe button on whichever service you're listening on. Like us on Facebook, like us on Twitter, and hit that subscribe button if you're listening to us on YouTube. Any shout-outs for you guys today?
I just want to shout out this is going to be a sarcastic shout out, but shout out to the Boston Red Sox, who are only a game ahead of the Orioles. Congratulations to y'all, because that's not very good. And then the Dodgers, Padres, and Giants are all separated by half a game. In the early going.
Yeah, I don't think we expected the Padres to be competitive right now with Fernando Tatis not playing, but we'll see if they can keep it up.
Oh, my man Manny Machado is raking.
Yeah, and Joe Musgrove is killing it on the mound too.
Yeah, he's very much carrying the load.
And for my fantasy team.
Yeah.
Shout out to my fantasy team.
Yeah, Evan's fantasy team is crushing it. He just almost scored 200 points this past week, which was like 30-some more than we've ever seen in a 7-day week in our 2-year history. That's insane.
Yeah. My team isn't doing so well, and a lot of that's because of me. I've been a very piss-poor manager to start the year. I made a trade and then forgot that all the guys that I traded for don't go into the lineup automatically. I got to actually go pull them off the bench and put them in there.
Well, you still got plenty of time to right the ship. We still got 17 more games, Eric. So
yeah, but my team's not that good either. It's a combination of bad things.
My team was terrible week 1. I think my team was ranked worse than yours, but I've won the last 2 because I got active on the waivers. I picked up some players, and we're doing a little bit better.
Well, I'm beating you right now, but I don't know what that actually means because I don't know how many.
Oh, y'all are playing each other this week?
Yeah, we're playing each other.
We're playing each other. Well, yesterday only 3 of my players even played, and almost your entire hitting lineup was had a game to play. So
it happens.
So we'll see what happens. I'm more interested to see what our lineups look like on Thursday. If that means you're going to have a bunch of guys resting on Thursday and my guys will be playing, we'll see.
Yes, we shall.
So
a lot of zeros in Eric's lineup.
Any shout outs for you, Eric?
Shout out to my man Bomani Jones. He got His
Yeah.
series HBO or Game Theory on HBO renewed for a second season.
Yeah.
Listeners know that Cory and I both watched the series in the initial 6-episode run, and it started off pretty good, and I think it got a lot better as the series went on. So happy to see that happen for him.
Yeah,
He's
definitely some segments early on in the run that I was like, this isn't really that good. It's barely watchable. But his, the main story they did each week was always very, very interesting. And even the other segments got better by the time we got to episode 6.
Yeah, and that's sort of what he talked about. He said, those first couple episodes, it was almost like it was written for a comedian, and that's not what he does. He's not a guy who's just going to rip off, jokes about 4 or 5 stories real quick. It's nice to have like a flow where he can get a little bit deeper into the weeds with the stuff, which is where he thrives. So,
yep.
Good adjustment made for him, like him and Steve Kerr, both just making good adjustments this week. Yep. He's doing his Evening Jones podcast right now, which is something he kind of retired for a little while, but that's always a great listen. I'm sure I'll tune into that because I'm sure he'll be talking a lot about his show and other things. So happy for him. Glad to see him having some success.
All right.
Yeah.
And
Adley threw out a base runner trying to steal, and Gunnar Henderson hit a 3-run home run tonight for Bowie.
That's encouraging.
Nice.
Yes.
My shout-outs for tonight will start with the first few episodes of this final season of Better Call Saul, which have been like that. They have been amazing. Eric and I both very happy with how things are going so far, and looking forward to seeing how the series ends.
Well, I'm not gonna say I'm happy with how things are going, but the show is very good.
We're happy with the production of the show, the way the production of the show has gone so far in this season. What's actually been happening has been a lot. It's been crazy. So if you have watched Better Call Saul, but you have not started watching this last season, do that. You need to get on it because it's been crazy, and we're looking forward to seeing how it leads into Breaking Bad. And my other shout out, hopefully the first of many for this calendar year, to the DeMatha Cross Country team. We had our banquet finally last night after it was postponed due to the Omicron wave back in December. And it was a great evening last night, celebrating with them, celebrating all their achievements from this past season, starting to look ahead to next season and everybody that we've got returning. We got to honor several of our athletes with different awards, Most Improved, MVP, several coaches and captains awards, and got to name our 2 captains for next year. So I'm really looking forward to working with them this summer and into the fall. And really happy to have my 2 assistant coaches. So shout out to David Hoke and Anthony Battle, who's you guys know through our fantasy football league. They'll be back with me again as my assistant coaches, and I could not be more excited. So that is going to do it for us. As I said, hit the like and subscribe button everywhere that you can for us. We'll be back again next week with episode 193. And until then, for Eric and Evan, I'm Cory Puffett saying so long and thank